good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you for joining us on the Sportsline Podcast on CHCH. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Now, as we're always proud to do, this podcast shines a spotlight on teams, athletes, officials, and executives that hail from our Southern Ontario region. But today and every once in a while, we like to square off about sports. Well, after being in the sports television business for over 30 years, I can confirm that some of the best sports discussions occur right in the newsroom. At times, these water cooler debates can be hilarious, and at times, yeah, folks, they can get heated. News at 6 and 11 editor Dave Roberts is a hardcore sports fan that I've trusted and chatted with for years. And like fellow colleagues Tim Boland and Jason Gaidola, you know what? Quite honestly, I just wanted to talk sports with this fella and bring him on the Sportsline Podcast Square Off. Dave, great to be to have you here and to talk a little sports.
Thanks. Terrified to be here, actually, Bubba. But I'm going to go through with it. It was either Joe Rogan's podcast or yours, and I chose yours, Bob.
I appreciate that.
I chose yours.
And the thing is, too, with you being here, this is, and people do understand that are listening and watching here on the podcast, you're normally behind the scenes.
That's right.
And you've made your living doing that.
Yeah, and that was purposely done so I didn't have to be on camera. So I've been editing for over 20 years now, and it's a lot simpler for me to be behind the camera. I don't feel the stress of the television lights. That's what gets me. That's the stress. I don't know how you do it.
Well, I don't know how you sit in that thing under stressful situations where something, we need it, and like you are putting together these these packages, these highlights for me in sports, and boom, you fire them off error free. And I think it's kind of an exchange, a little bit of admiring what you do as well.
Yeah, it can be stressful at times. A couple of days ago, there was a couple of late things going in there, and we seem to always get it done. Dave and my editing partner, also named Dave. We do get it done every day, and it can be a grind and it can be stressful, but this is more stressful to me.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about, Dave, the other editor, and like JT as well, too. We've got some guys and some girls as well, too, that edit, that love sports. So that's why I thought it was a natural for you to come on here. We talk sports every single day that you're working.
We have had a lot of chat.
We have had some chat. So let's start there. Where did you get your early love for sports?
I think my older brother, Paul, he's 4 years older than me. I remember back in our home in Brantford, Ontario, home of Wayne Gretzky.
Shout out.
We were, it was the early to mid 80s, and my brother was, we were always talking about Gretzky because he's our hometown hero back then, and he's hitting his prime at that point. So we started out as Oiler fans, and then my brother decided to become a Leaf fan, and they were really bad. Yeah, back then. That was Harold Ballard, 1984, 1985. I started you copy your older brother.
Sure.
You really do. And I followed in his footsteps, and we're still Leaf fans to this day. But that's how I got into it, just basically copying my older brother, wanting to be like him. And I started watching the Leafs in 85, 86, and then other sports followed. I got into football because of my older brother. He was playing high school football, and I was like 11 years old, and I was like, I have to learn the rules of football. I need to know what's going on, because I'd always be switching it because it always preempt my programs when I was like 9 and 10 on a Sunday.
Right.
But then I started embracing it, and then I started getting into the Denver Broncos because they were doing big things back in the late 80s. They took on San Fran in the Super Bowl.
Yep.
That was the first big game I remember, and they got slaughtered. And then I was just a fan after that because of John Elway.
Right.
And then it just progressed, and then my life became sports. Wrestling, too. Loved WWF wrestling.
Yeah.
Couldn't get enough of it. My life from about age 9 to 13 was basically Leafs and wrestling. That was it. That's all I cared about.
Really? It's amazing.
I think my parents were just like, what's up with this kid?
But the wrestling thing, I think everyone at some point gets into for a year or two, especially in those days. Those are the more early days of some of the big Hulk Hogan, a guy that I know that you admire.
Oh, I love the Hulks. Still to this day, he can't do anything wrong.
He can't? It's amazing. So then eventually, of course, your love for sports is there. You're going to school in Brantford and doing your thing. How does it end up that you say, I need to be in television?
Looking back, I always wanted to be a play-by-play announcer. From a young age, I loved Bob Cole. I love Joe Bowen. Like, those are two of my heroes growing up. Even Chris Cuthbert early on. So I always envisioned myself being a play-by-play announcer, and I'd be in my dining room with hockey cards. I'd create my own games, and I would commentate what's going on, even though I know what's going to happen. I'd still commentate it. I'd have the oven in the kitchen. My mom would set 10-minute timers for the periods, and I'd commentate the games. I'd have wrestling figures. I'd commentate that. So it was like, I'm going to go that way. And then as reality sunk in that, the odds of me getting into play-by-play announcing, it's going to be tough. I don't have a, athletic background. I'm not a professional player. It could be to my mid-40s or 50s before I actually get a gig. Right. So I said, maybe I go behind the camera. Let's see that. Let's go that route and see what happens. Right. And that's basically how it developed. And editing really took off for me. And it's been a way of life for me now.
Well, and you're really good at it too. I mean, you're actually our very first Sportsline promo. You and I sat together and put together, I thought, a real good looking piece of video, which I'm really proud of what we put together there. And I think if I look back here, and help me out there too, because you started out on the morning live program. Because I didn't really see you for the first little while, because as Tim and I discussed when he was here. If you work the morning show and you work the 6 and 11, you just don't see each other. Yeah. You're in two different worlds. You were putting together a sports segment there for the morning live program.
Yeah, I started writing it after a while for Bob Cowan. I asked if
who knows nothing about sports.
Correct. I started putting it together. And I talked to the executive producer. I'm like, you guys cool if I write this? And they were like, yeah. And I actually did it to get an upgrade. But it turns out that writers get paid the same as editors, so they couldn't give me an upgrade. So I was like, well, I got to keep doing it now or I'll look like a total schmuck. So then I wrote it for a few years and edited it. And I was on the morning show for 10 years and then finally switched. So that took a lot out of me. Those hours are not kind.
No, they're not. Now, remind me here, weren't there a couple that you actually voiced?
Yeah, it was actually for the weekend sports. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Right.
They did not have someone to cover the weekend. I guess you weren't available.
No.
And I didn't want to go on camera. I was like, I can't do it. Like if I blow it, it's going viral and my life's over. I can't do it. So I said, well, why don't I do sports rap, write it, and I'll voice it. And it worked out fine. Right. I mean, it was nothing. I was proud of it. No, but for someone that's editing that can do that, that's great. Right?
Well, it certainly makes you very valuable to a station to be asked. Hey, you got to be, and nowadays in television, as you know this, you got to be a 5-tool player, right? You certainly do. Now, I don't know if it was the beginning of it. I know you love music. I have a feeling that let's ask you, where did this love for music come from? Because you like music, but you like an aggressive style of music.
Yeah, some people wouldn't even call it music. Really, Bobs. Ask my parents. They wouldn't call it music.
Okay.
I love aggressive metal.
Right.
I've always been a metalhead. Again, I think my brother, I heard Master of Puppets Metallica being played through his door when I was 8 years old. And I'm like, it sticks with you. Right. And then he started giving me cassettes. And I just went progressively harder. I liked heavier and heavier stuff. And then a guy that we work with, Justin, one of the camera guys, we knew each other prior to him working here, and he's like, hey, I'm writing some music to put together like a thrash death metal album. Would you do the lyrics and sing? And I said yes right away. Because who doesn't want to scream into a microphone? So, yeah, we did that. He kept pumping out the tunes to me. I would write the lyrics, send him a demo. He'd come over. We record it just in my basement at the bar. And he's got all the great software that it can make a record sound professional. So we've put our stuff on Spotify. Our drummer's out in Europe. He's in London, England. He's just a freelancer. We just pay him to do the tracks. He sends it back. Our bassist was in Los Angeles. So we're like world metal, Bob. We got continents here, man.
Well, for our listeners and viewers, I mean, you've released a little mini EP and a video. So let's let the folks, this is Necrotic Divinity?
Necrotic Divinity. I don't know what track it is. Decrepit Existence, I believe.
That's exactly what it is.
It might be a little extreme, but hang tight.
Let's have a listen, folks. I admit it, I'm a fan. I love Zeppelin. I love Deep Purple, Iron Maiden. I've had a point. I actually was a bit of a punker at one time, and which would be a pretty aggressive music. Where does this come from? I don't even know this side of you.
I don't know. I don't know where the aggression comes from, because if anybody meets me, they're like, he's a really nice guy. I'm a Catholic, like a Catholic shouldn't be doing this. But, I think I'm a really good guy. I just have, I don't know, music aggression. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll just chill out at home and throw on a concert on YouTube of like something pro shot that's in that realm. Mm-hmm. And it's a stress reliever for me. And people are like, that usually causes more people more stress.
Right.
But for me, it actually chills me out. So I don't understand it. Only people with a love of heavy metal will truly understand the music.
And are you doing shows or?
No, so what we did, we recorded a full-length album. We recorded an EP last year, and Justin just got a bassist that's more local, because when you get your bassist in Los Angeles, that's not really helping for gigs. He was great though. Yeah. So he's getting someone local, and then we just need a drummer that can play locally. And I'll go up on stage. I might need a drink or two.
Yeah, but this is the thing though. You're so comfortable in the music realm, being on stage, having people watch you. But yet you say the lights are coming on in the studio, and really it's just you and I.
Well, if I had a few drinks, Bubs, I'd probably be a little more relaxed, which is something you do before a metal show, probably. Yeah, I mean, it's noon. I'm sober. Everything's a little nerve-wracking right now, but I feel more comfortable as this has went on, so we're good.
Well, let's get into another realm that you love so much. Let's talk a little sports. Let's go into the Sportsline Square-Off. You ready?
Sounds good.
All right, let's do this. You talked about your days of being a Maple Leafs fan. That will continue. I got a feeling it will continue for the rest of your life. I know you and I have had some real deep discussions about the Maple Leafs, and I've seen you really disappointed at some point in the postseason, right? And as many Leaf fans are. Do you think that Brad Treliving has put together a team that can be trusted, not so much in the regular season, but in the postseason?
Time will tell, Bubs. I can't say that this is the most confident Leaf team I've ever had going into the playoffs. I mean, 3 weeks ago, before this 7-game winning streak that came to an end last night, they were teetering on maybe not even making the playoffs. Yep. If you looked at the standings, Detroit was right on the tails. And now all of a sudden, 7 wins in a row. They're third, I believe. But if you look at the first round matchup right now, if it started today, it's Boston or Florida. I mean, they're tied in points. So are the Leafs able to beat either of those teams? I mean, history will say that no, they haven't been able to do either. Mm-hmm. So I'm not super confident that this is the team that's going to go all the way. But what happens every year in the playoffs, Bubs, there's always a team that you think is going to do nothing, and they end up in the Stanley Cup final. You've seen it with St. Louis. You've seen it with Montreal. You've seen it with Vegas.
Right.
And I mean, the Leafs could easily go all the way, or they could be out in 4.
And you look at the lineup. The lineup to me screams of offense, obviously, with Nylander, Marner, Austin Matthews having a career year. Secondary scoring has been an issue at times, but during this win streak, it was really, really well. I just still curious about your best defenseman is an offensive-minded defenseman. And I feel like in the playoffs, it's a different kind of hockey. Can the Leafs play that kind of hockey that we see in the playoffs?
Well, my Leaf fandom says no, because it's just been utter disappointment year after year for me.
Right.
I've been through so many, 92, 93, 93, 94, all the 98s to 2002s. Mm-hmm. Those were all years I thought we were going to do severe damage, and we came so close. Mm-hmm. And I say we because I am a part of Leaf Nation, and I don't care.
I accept that. That's fair.
So I say we a lot on all my teams. And the offense, that core 4 is just... other than Tavares, everybody's in their prime. Like, they're just at that perfect age. Matthews is burying goals. You can't even see a shot. It's just no goalie can stop him. Nylander's having a great year. Marner's just pumping in assists every night, like, other than last night. 2 assists a game. The defense, it seems to have been a little better as of late, but in the goaltending, now it looks like they got 3 goalies they're going with. How as a goaltender do you get revved up to be told, you're in the press box tonight? Like, how do you keep that fire going when you might not even be sitting with your team?
Right.
So,
and I think and it's crazy because you do need the hot goaltender, and Samsonov has had his time. He looks good now, but there was a time he was put on waivers. Right, he's put on waivers. Jones has been put on waivers as well too. So it's crazy, and there seems to be a lot of trust in the return of Joe Woll, who's a kid. I just don't know if
he is a kid. He's got some good numbers. He's played well when he's been healthy, but it seems health is an issue with this Leaf goaltending. I was going to say tandem, but that would suggest 2, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be 2. Let's move on. Austin Matthews.
Yes.
And I know you just kind of talked about the fact that his shot right now may be the best in the league. There's already an argument that's coming out right now that, the MVP discussion will be between him, who will probably lead the league in goals, might not get points in the fact that Kucherov from Tampa and McKinnon from Colorado and, of course, McDavid out in Edmonton might have more points. So that MVP discussion is certainly up there. But are we looking at the best Maple Leaf of all time? And the only reason why I'll say that, next year, he is going to score more goals than any Maple Leaf of all time. He will pass and break all of Matt Sundin's records. And he'll do so by over 400 games more. Less, pardon me.
It's really unbelievable.
Is he the best Maple Leaf of all time?
I just have such a love for those guys in the 90s. Like, I know Gilmore wasn't there long, but when he was spectacular. And Sundin, probably a better playmaker, Matt Sundin, but in terms of pure goal scoring, Austin Matthews by a landslide. I mean, you had your Gary Leibman get his 50 goals one year, and you had your Dave Anderchuk, who was always potting goals, but something different about Matthews, and he's just entering his prime. He's going to do this for another 5, 6, 7 years, maybe.
Yeah.
He's on pace for 70, and he's probably getting 70. And I've never seen a Leaf come even close to getting 70.
No, I guess him getting 60 would be the closest.
Well, what did he have a couple years ago?
He had 60.
He had 60.
He had 60, and 60 right on the dot. And the crazy thing too is that Rick Vaive scored 50 goals for the Maple Leafs 3 times, and Matthews may do it 6 times if he continues at this pace.
Yeah, and I think goals were going in a little more back in the early mid to mid 80s.
Fair point.
Matthews, the shot, you can't see it. I mean, sometimes I'm watching the game, I'm like, where'd that go? And you see the replay, and it's like top shelf. Goalie can't even move. He can't move.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd say he's the best goal scorer. In terms of best Leaf ever, there's an argument there.
What about your guy 17?
I love Wendell. Wendell's not the greatest Leaf of all time. He's probably the biggest fan favorite of all time.
Right.
I mean, everyone loves Wendell, but just so many injuries that derailed his career. And but he was a 40-goal man at one point.
Yeah. So in your area, the number one guy is it Sundin?
I guess Sundin, because he did play longer than Gilmore. Gilmore was there for 4 or 5 years, I think.
Yep.
But, yeah, when Dougie was rolling, I mean, what a hero.
He was and still continues to be. All right, Raptors, they had a hero time in 2019. And since then, it's been a slow burn down to maybe not even making the playoffs this year, folks. They are battling for, and then we're talking about a team that's won 3 in a row, and they're actually playing pretty well. But, they're looking to make a move towards that play-in position, which is a kind of mini playoff to get into the postseason. It's kind of a youth movement. They refuse to use the word rebuild. Do you, and I know you like basketball too, do you have patience for this team, or is it like, call me when you guys are good?
Yeah, I mean, there's patience. I mean, I really started watching the Raps when my kid got into it, and he got into it the year they won it. These kids, they're all bandwagoners. What can I say? And then they jump right off when the team's 26-50. Yeah, there's going to have to be some patience there. I think the only Raptor still there from 2 years ago is Boucher.
That's it.
And he's not getting any game action unless they're up by 30 or down by 30. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do with him? Obviously, he's probably gone at the end of the year, too.
And in 2019, he was a spare part. The team is just like the loss of Siakam, that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was on vacation when news of Siakam came down the wire, and I was like, this team is in full rebuild mode. Now, are they in full rebuild mode? Because they do have Barnes, who's great. He's a great player. I mean, triple-double in his last game. Emmanuel Quigley, great player. And Barrett, his numbers have only went up since coming from New York. So they're figuring out how to use these guys, and with 4 wins in a row, I think, was it 4?
3, I think. Right.
3 or 4. It looks like they're heading in the right direction, but I think you're going to see struggles. I mean, I bet on sports a lot, and I'll bet against the Raptors. They always screw me every time. I can't figure them out. I just can't figure out when this team's going to win or when it's going to lose, and normally you would have a better idea, but they're so just back and forth.
That's a great point about this team, that you look at particular matchups, and you and I will do this sometimes, hours before a game, and you're like, what do you think about the Raps? And it's like they don't stand a chance. Like for example, here's an example. They're playing the Dallas Mavericks tonight. And I look at that matchup and I say there's no chance.
No chance.
And there's no chance. But, they're playing one of the better scorers in the league. I know they're at home, I believe. It just seems to me it's tailor-made for a loss. But sometimes the Raptors play their best games against some of the better opponents in the NBA.
Right, and the Mavs just lost on a half-court buzzer beater last night to Cleveland. And they, what they say about the second night of a back-to-back, the team's just not as sharp. Mm-hmm. Perhaps the Mavericks are ripe for the picking for the Raptors to take it. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm not putting money on it.
Right.
But I bet you Doncic has 35 and Irving has 30, and the Raptors keep it close.
Let's even throw this caveat in there. If Doncic plays, the NBA, it's getting insane about the amount of players, and I know that the commissioner has installed some fines, and you've got to declare why a player isn't playing. Like, it is crazy about the amount of this player's got an ankle. It's the second half of a back-to-back, and they're not playing. It's almost not fun.
No, could you imagine being a fan where you travel 2,000 miles to see this team for the first time? You're 9 years old and you're there to see LeBron, and his toes hurt. He can't play because he's got a toe injury. His toe's not injured. He's just taking the night off because these guys have it in their contracts that they can take off probably 15 to 20 games a year, and they take full advantage of it. And you know what? I would too. Why put your body through it if you don't have to? If you're going to make $30 million a year, you might as well stay healthy.
The Raptors are actually the people that started this, really. I know some people say the likes of the San Antonio, actually. Popovich was the first to start sitting players. But really, making it famous was what the Raptors did with Kawhi Leonard, playing him 65 games, playing him, spotting him here and there. They ended up getting the best out of him and win a championship, and everyone said, this is the way to do it.
It worked.
It worked. Now, not working right now very well is Alek Manoah, okay? Let's be fair here. He had his first start since August. Yesterday in his spring training debut, and he was hammered. Pitching an inning and 2/3, gives up 4 hits, gives up 4 runs, and I think the worst part for me is that he hit 3 batters. It's been a long time, and we've seen this in sports where someone looks so good, their careers are off to great starts. We're talking about an all-star, right? And he has just fallen in the tank. Didn't pitch. The Blue Jays, he was so bad last year, the Blue Jays said, we can't afford to put you out there because we're in a playoff chase, and you can't work. So what do you do with this guy? Do you think he can reclaim that all-star status?
It's tough. It's tough for a guy to get it back. I remember Ricky Romero Remember him?
Wow.
How on fire he was.
15 wins.
15 wins. And then the next year started. And I remember going on a Jays road trip to Detroit. He walked 8 guys. He was in the midst of just a terrible year. And it ruined his career. He was done after that. So, I mean, you don't want the same thing to happen to Alek Manoah. This guy was potential Cy Young Award winner, and that wasn't that long ago. And last year it just started to crumble, and I believe he made that comeback. He had a good first game, but then he faced the Angels and hit that guy in the face, if you remember that.
Right.
And I don't think he hits so many guys. He's crazy wild, and he's like Charlie Sheen on Cleveland. Remember that?
Wild thing. You know, it's yeah, you're right. It's kind of painful to watch at times because, and not only was he dominant on the mound, he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He didn't mind talking to batters, and you remember there was a little back and forth in the All-Star game. I can't remember who it was, Veritek with him in Boston. There was some words being exchanged, and I think Blue Jay fans loved it because here was a guy standing up for the Blue Jays. But as we always say in sports, you can talk trash, but you got to back it up. And he's nowhere close to backing it up. No. And help me here because, again, you're familiar with this team. I think for this team to be successful, especially successful in the playoffs and maybe even win a round if they get to the postseason, they need him to be good.
They do. And I almost feel like it's karma once he started mouthing off to other guys. That's kind of right around the time where things started sinking for him. And you know, some people believe in karma. It doesn't look good right now. I don't know if this guy's going to last the year. He might, you know, that first spring training game, nobody takes too much stock into it. We do a little more because Alek Manoah, he just had a terrible outing. So, of course, we're going to think that, right?
Well, they're already saying that. They're like, we weren't looking at the numbers. Right. We're just looking at velocity and whatever.
His velo's up.
You know, but give me a break. If he pitched 2 innings and struck out 4, we'd all be chatting about it. And the Blue Jays would be chatting about it.
Right, but it really means nothing till April. Right. And we'll see where he's at come June. You know how baseball season goes. There's multiple huge changes that go through every team. I don't know if Manoah even makes it to the All-Star break. I hope he does. I wish him the best. You know, he was a real bulldog for the Jays. And now it's like, what are you going to get from him? 3 innings, 5 hits, 3 walks, 2 hit batters?
Not good.
No.
Not good is what's going on with professional wrestling these days. Now, folks, if you haven't heard it, Vince McMahon charged sexual assault, trafficking, women allegations against him. This is the second time in basically 3 years where he's been in major trouble with the law. He is the face of the WWE. I know others have stepped in for him as a commissioner or whatever, but going back to the 80s when he took over the family, the wrestling promotion from, I believe, his father, he's been the face of the WWE. Can it ever be the same, Dave?
Well, I'm sure fans will want it the same. I mean, if you've noticed, like when this news broke probably 3 weeks ago, a month ago, it was only talked about for a couple days, and then it dies right out because what do? They got The Rock showing up on live broadcasts because he's part of that TKO umbrella that is going to have UFC and WWE as different elements for sure, different entities. But what great timing for WWE to have The Rock show up and distract everyone. And Vince McMahon, who did some pretty heinous things. I mean, it hasn't been proven, but I mean, it's not looking good for him. It's all quieted down on that front because you got Dwayne Johnson, the world's biggest movie star, coming back to perhaps wrestle at WrestleMania. So, I mean, what perfect timing to really squash this terrible news because it was only talked about for about a weekend.
You're right.
And I'm on TikTok. I'm seeing it all throughout the weekend. And then all of a sudden, there's nothing about him anymore. And now it's all about The Rock being in the ring.
Well, is that typical wrestling? It's pre-planned? I mean, obviously what happened to McMahon wasn't pre-planned.
Right.
But we've kind of known that he's been kind of in and out. He had talked about selling the company. Like, he's been kind of a controversial figure for some time now.
Yeah, he was supposed to he did step down a couple years ago when all these first allegations came out. And then he took a back seat for a bit and then came back. And he just put himself right back in it. He's like, I'm back behind the scenes again. And then apparently he stopped paying one of the females that was hush money or whatever. That so she brought it to the limelight, and it was the worst thing he could have done because now he's never coming back. And even guys like Brock Lesnar, who are rumored to be involved in this. I mean, you can look it up online. I'm not going to say what happened, but they've erased him from the website as far as I know. And he is not talked about. He will not be at WrestleMania. I don't know if you'll ever see Brock Lesnar in wrestling ever again.
You talk about Hulk Hogan earlier, and I would believe that would be your childhood hero, fair to say, in wrestling?
He's the real American hero.
North American hero. Let's go that far. But he's your guy.
Yeah.
But is really The Rock that guy right now? I mean, Hogan can't wrestle anymore, I don't believe. He can step in the ring and get people all cranked up.
Yeah.
But has Dwayne Johnson sort of replaced him as that guy that just is again, I'll use him as a face of wrestling?
Yeah, not for me personally. I mean, because I got into it when Hulkamania was running wild, brother. And you did too. You just don't want to admit it.
I did.
So, yeah, I mean, anybody that started watching during that Attitude Era from '97 and up, they love The Rock and they love Stone Cold. And Stone Cold did WrestleMania last year or 2 years ago. He was in a match, and there was a lot of people booing The Rock, though. I don't think it went the way WWE thought it was going to go when they brought The Rock back, because he was challenging Roman Reigns, who is the current champion, and his real-life cousin. And then they were all saying Cody Rhodes, who's Dusty Rhodes' son, they were all saying he has to finish his story. And so now Cody Rhodes has stepped in, and he's fighting Roman Reigns, and The Rock's still showing up. The Rock's now a heel.
Which doesn't seem right.
But you got to watch his heel performance, though, Bubs. I'm telling you, you see some of this stuff he was doing last Friday night, just insulting the crowd on all levels. It is hilarious. I love it. I love seeing the heel dice the crowd up. Like, it brings me back to the Ravishing Rick Rude days where he's just calling everybody sweat hogs.
Or the $1 Million Man.
Oh, yeah, just making people, bounce a basketball in front of you, give them $5.
Here's $20 and then sorry.
Yeah, so, I mean, perfect timing for The Rock to show up to just squash these McMahon things, and wrestling continues on, and they keep making huge money, and they will continue to keep making huge money. People love it.
Well, you're so right on that. There is no sport like professional wrestling. It has been around from the 30s, the 40s, and it has its moments where it peaks at just unbelievable popularity. Then it kind of comes down, but it keeps coming back. It's the most cyclical sport, I think, that's actually out there. Now, I think another thing that it says attracted you is legalized sports gambling, and you're not the only one. In fact, the majority of people listening to this podcast right now like to put a $5 down on something, whether it's Proline or whatever. All the legalized betting houses that are out there, and there's so many of them right now. Let me ask you this though, on the overview, and I think you can answer this honestly: has it change your sports habits, and will it help sports or will it hurt sports?
It's definitely changed my sports habits. I remember a couple summers ago, my buddy and I were actually watching on like a Tuesday night. We were watching the Phillies and the Marlins playing in a 1-0 game, and we had our money on the Marlins. Like, you wouldn't have caught me watching that game even a year prior. I would have been like, I'm not watching that. Like, that's a terrible matchup. But now when you get $25 on it and it can win you $250 because your other games hit, you're watching the Marlins game. So it definitely has affected my sports viewing habits. I mean, I place wagers daily. I mean, it's been successful for me, which is shocking, because if you had told me a couple of years ago that you're going to start sports betting and you're going to make a fair amount of money that's going to help you, I would have laughed, because I used to do Proline when I was like 18 and 19. I was very unsuccessful. But you do take it. There's so many people that I know that have, I've sent them referral links because people want to get in on it. And it's easier to do on your phone than it going into a Shoppers Drug Mart, filling out the boxes and stuff. You just hook your bank account to it and you're going to town. But, I mean, it can really mess you up if you're not good at it. And there's upsets all the time. I remember watching the Dodgers-Jays last year, and it was a late game. I had my buddy over. We're on vacation. Jays were up by 3 in the 9th. and it would have won me $200, and I could have cashed out.
The old Mitch White game.
Yeah, I could have cashed out, and I didn't. My buddy's like, "Nah, they're not going to blow it," and they instantly blew it. It just crumbled. Your boy Swansea got lit up, and then Mitch White came in. I was like, "We're done. It's over." And I went to bed very demoralized. But then the next day, I remember having a bet on the World Cup, Women's World Cup game. Are Team Canada going to score a goal in the first half? And they did. So the money that I lost that night, I won it on Team Canada scoring with about 2 minutes left in the first half. So it all worked out. You just don't know what's going to happen next. And that you get excited and you get depressed big time.
Well, and let's be honest here, there has to be, because Jason talked about this last week about in terms of his wagering on sports. Like in some ways, it almost makes you a better sports fan because you need to study, don't you?
Yeah. I didn't do it today because I was more studying this show. But I'll be hitting it. Don't worry. Usually I take a look in the morning on matchups. I'll look, what are they doing in their last 10? What have they done head-to-head? How are they at home? What's the power play? Like, that's just for hockey. Basketball, I do a lot of player props. Did he play the night before? How many triple doubles has Sabonis got in the last week, right? I've been telling you all week, Sabonis triple double. He's hit 3 in a row. Do not take Sabonis for a triple double in the next game because what are the odds he's going to do 4 in a row, right? But take him at the one after. That's what I'm already thinking. So yeah, you're always one step ahead. You think you can beat the bookies, and sometimes you do. But they know what they're doing. They know those lines. They're to a T. You see it. Giannis, 27.5 points. He'll finish with 28 or 26 most of the time. It's so close. I don't know how they do it, but they do it.
I don't dare ask, and it leads exactly from what you just said there. There are times to me where I'm watching a sport and I'm like, how did this happen? And again, as I've declared several times on this show, I do not wager. You know that about me. But I seem to find some entertainment in watching other people do it. I really do. And there are things I have learned, but there are things that happen in sports that sometimes frighten me. And it leads me to believe that sometimes people ask me, Bubs, is sports fixed? Do you ever get that feeling sometimes?
Yeah, the ones I lose, I definitely think they're fixed. Some of those NFL games, the crazy endings, you're like, come on. Right. Like, that's unbelievable. But sometimes those so-called fixes work in your favor. Right. And you're like laughing. Like, I'm glad that happened, right? Basketball too. I mean, how do you plan a fix on that game last night where Cleveland buries a halftime buzzer beater to win? For sure. But if you had the Mavericks to win there, you're feeling it in your stomach. It's not a good feeling. And I've been I bet on the Bills. It was the first year I started betting the Bills Chiefs when the Chiefs had 13 seconds left. And my buddy and I, we were going to win 300 each. And it would have been our biggest bet win because we were rookies. And then Patty Mahomes drives it downfield 13 seconds. Like, come on. Like, when does that happen?
I don't know. Please, that hurts me in many ways.
I know you don't want to talk about it.
But you know what? And this Super Bowl, how were the Chiefs, who beat Buffalo in Buffalo, Baltimore in Baltimore, played in one of the coldest games in the history of the league in a home game against the Dolphins, how were they installed as 2-point underdogs in a Super Bowl?
I don't know.
It's crazy.
I don't know. I told you right from the get-go, you can't go against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. And that's what I did last year too. And I put money. I won a decent amount because you don't go against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. He seems to always find a way to get it done. And guess what? If he's in the playoffs next year, I'm going to do the same thing. Yeah. Because if he loses, then so be it. Then I went out on top at least. But I can't go against that guy.
Whether you're a sports wager or not, he is the Brady of the day.
He is.
He's the Brady of the day. You just cannot count the guy ever.
And he's the arch nemesis for the Denver Broncos. Like, Kansas City and Denver have a long storied rivalry, and I've always hated the Chiefs. But we're just not that good right now. So I might as well make some money off the arch nemesis, right?
Dude, this has been really fun talking sports with you and breaking it down on some of the things.
I hope I did okay.
You were spectacular.
All right.
And I hope the fans really enjoyed your candidness as well too, talking about several different topics. So thank you so much for joining us on the Sportsline Podcast. This is really the continuation of a conversation that might continue an hour from now.
It might. And check out Necrotic Divinity, Spotify.
There you go.
All right.
For the metal lovers. All right, guys. That's your Sportsline podcast for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports. Now, please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you do have something to say, please comment. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline podcast possible, I'll always thank you. And folks, I hope to see you tomorrow.